The snow fell so thick that Franklin Fitzgerald could barely see his horse's ears, and he knew if he didn't find shelter soon, both he and the mare would freeze to death before dawn. The Wyoming winter of 1883 was proving to be one of the harshest in memory, and Franklin had been caught out in it while trying to track down a stray calf from his small ranch outside of Oroville. The wind howled like a wounded animal, cutting through his heavy coat as if it were made of paper, and his fingers had gone numb inside his gloves an hour ago. He squinted against the driving snow, searching for any landmark that might guide him home, when he heard something that made him pull hard on the reins. His mare, Belle, stopped immediately, her breath coming out in great steaming clouds. Franklin held perfectly still, straining to hear over the wind. There it was again, a sound that didn't belong to the storm, a human voice, thin and desperate, calling out from somewhere ahead. Without hesitation, Franklin urged Belle forward, following the sound. His heart pounded as he tried to locate the source, knowing that every second counted in weather like this. The voice came again, clearer now, and he realized it was a woman. Then another voice joined it, nearly identical to the first. Two women out here in this frozen hell. He spotted them huddled against a massive boulder about 50 yards off the trail, their dark cloaks covered in snow, making them almost invisible against the white landscape. As he drew closer, Franklin could see they were young women, twins by the look of them, clinging to each other for warmth. Their lips had taken on a bluish tint, and their bodies were shaking violently. Franklin dismounted quickly, nearly losing his footing in the deep snow. "Can you stand?" he called out, his voice barely carrying over the wind. The twin closest to him looked up, her brown eyes filled with fear and hope in equal measure. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth, "we have been out here for hours. Our wagon went over the embankment back there. The horses bolted." Franklin didn't waste time asking more questions. He could see they were past the point of being able to walk any distance. "I am taking you both to my ranch. It is not far, but you will need to ride with me. Can you hold on?" The second twin nodded weakly. Franklin helped the first woman to her feet, supporting her weight as her legs nearly gave out beneath her. Her sister tried to stand but collapsed immediately. Franklin caught her before she hit the ground, feeling how cold her body was even through all their layers of clothing. These women were minutes away from succumbing to the cold entirely. With strength born of desperation, Franklin lifted the weaker twin onto Belle's back, then helped her sister up behind her. He climbed up in front of them both, feeling the horse strain under the triple load but knowing Belle was strong enough to make it. "Hold on to me," he instructed. "Do not let go no matter what." 4 small arms wrapped around his middle, and Franklin could feel how badly both women were shaking. He turned Belle toward home, praying he could remember the way in the blinding snow. The ranch house was only about 2 miles from where he had found them, but in these conditions, it might as well have been 20. The ride seemed to take forever. Franklin talked to Belle constantly, guiding her with his voice as much as his hands, since visibility was nearly zero. Behind him, the twins had fallen silent, and he worried they might have lost consciousness. He reached back occasionally to shake them gently, making sure they stayed awake. Finally, blessedly, the dark shape of his barn emerged from the white chaos. Franklin had never been so relieved to see that old weathered structure in his life. He guided Belle straight into the barn, dismounting the moment they were inside and out of the wind. The twin sisters slumped forward, barely conscious now. Franklin worked quickly, lifting each woman down from the horse with care despite his hurry. He couldn't take time to unsaddle Belle properly, but he at least removed her bridle and threw a heavy blanket over her back. The house was only 30 feet from the barn, but it would be a difficult journey with two half-frozen women who could barely walk. He put one arm around each twin, supporting most of their weight, and pushed back out into the storm. The wind tried to knock all three of them down, but Franklin planted his feet stubbornly and pushed forward step by step. When his boot finally hit the wooden steps of his porch, he nearly wept with relief. Inside, the house was blessedly warm. Franklin kept the fire burning in the main room at all times during winter, a habit that had just saved 3 lives. He guided both women to the stone fireplace, settling them on the thick rug in front of it. Their clothes were soaked through, and he knew he needed to get them into dry things immediately. Franklin grabbed every blanket in the house, along with 2 of his own flannel shirts and pairs of long underwear. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said firmly, placing the dry items next to them. "I will turn my back and tend the fire. Call out when you are decent." He busied himself stoking the flames higher, adding more wood from the stack beside the hearth. Behind him, he could hear the rustle of fabric and labored breathing as the twins struggled to change with numb fingers. It seemed to take forever, and Franklin kept his eyes fixed firmly on the fire, giving them privacy. "We are dressed," one of them finally called out, her voice still shaky but stronger than before. Franklin turned to find both women wrapped in blankets, his oversized clothes hanging off their slender frames. Now that he could see them properly in the firelight, he was struck by how identical they were. Both had the same heart-shaped faces, the same dark brown hair that hung in wet tangles past their shoulders, and the same wide brown eyes. The only way he could tell them apart was a small beauty mark on the left cheek of the woman sitting on the right. "Thank you," they said in unison. And despite the seriousness of the situation, Franklin found himself smiling at the synchronicity. "You are welcome," he replied, moving to the kitchen area. "Now let me get some hot coffee into both of you, and then you can tell me how you ended up out there in the worst storm of the season." As the coffee heated on the stove, Franklin found himself studying the 2 women more carefully. They were young, probably in their early 20s, and there was something refined about their features that spoke of education and good breeding. Their hands, though red and chapped from the cold, were not the work-roughened hands of frontier women. These were Eastern ladies. He would bet his ranch on it. He poured 3 cups of coffee and brought them over, settling himself in the chair across from where the twins sat huddled together on the floor. They wrapped their hands around the warm cups gratefully, inhaling the steam. "I am Franklin Fitzgerald," he said. "This is my ranch, small as it is. You are safe here." The twin with the beauty mark spoke first. "I am Natalie Bennett, and this is my sister Noelle. We came from Boston 3 weeks ago. Our father passed away last month, and his will specified that we were to travel here to Wyoming to claim some land he owned. We hired a man in Cheyenne to drive us the rest of the way to Oroville, but he proved to be less competent than he claimed. When the storm hit, he panicked. The wagon went off the road, and he ran off with one of the horses, leaving us stranded. Anger flashed through Franklin at the thought of any man abandoning 2 women in a blizzard. "You are lucky to be alive." Another hour out there, and I would have found 2 frozen statues instead of 2 living women. Noelle, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was nearly identical to her sister's. "We cannot thank you enough, Mr. Fitzgerald. We truly thought we were going to die out there." "Franklin is fine," he said, waving away the formality. "And you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. This storm is not going to let up for at least another day or 2, maybe more. Even if I could get you to town, which I cannot, there would be no point. You are safer here." The twins exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Natalie spoke again. We do not wish to impose on your hospitality more than necessary. Perhaps when the storm breaks, if you could point us toward Oroville, we could find our way." Franklin snorted. "In the first place, you would freeze before you got 2 miles. In the second place, I am not in the habit of sending women out into the wilderness alone. And in the third place, as I said, you are welcome to stay. I have the room, and honestly, the company will be nice. Winter can get lonely out here." He saw relief wash over both their faces, though they tried to hide it. These were proud women, he realized, not accustomed to accepting charity. But pride did not keep a person warm in a Wyoming winter. "Now," Franklin continued, "you both need food." "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Noel admitted. "The driver did not want to stop once we left Cheyenne. He said we needed to make good time." Franklin shook his head in disgust as he stood and moved to the kitchen. He had venison stew simmering in a pot, always keeping something warm during the winter months, and he ladled out generous portions for all three of them. The twins ate ravenously, their manners forgotten in their hunger, and Franklin was glad to see color returning to their cheeks. As they ate, the storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and howling down the chimney. Franklin found himself grateful for his sturdy little ranch house, built low to the ground and constructed of thick logs that had weathered many such storms. He had built it himself 5 years ago when he had first claimed this land, and he had built it to last. "Tell me about this land your father left you," Franklin said as they finished eating. "Whereabouts is it?" Natalie pulled a folded paper from inside her shirt, where it had stayed relatively dry. "According to this deed, it is about 10 miles northwest of Oroville, 200 acres along Crazy Woman Creek. Father bought it as an investment years ago, before we were born. We had no idea he even owned it until the lawyer read his will." Franklin nodded thoughtfully. He knew the area she was describing. It was good land with water and decent grazing. "What do you plan to do with it? Sell it?" The twins looked at each other again, that silent communication passing between them once more. This time Noel answered, "We are not sure. In Boston, there is nothing left for us now. Father's debts consumed most of his estate. The only thing left of value was this land. We thought perhaps we might try to make a life here, but we do not know the first thing about ranching or farming." "It is a hard life," Franklin said honestly, "especially for 2 women alone. Wyoming is not Boston. The winters are brutal, the summers are hot, and the work never ends. You would need hired hands, which means money. You would need livestock and equipment and a house. All of that costs more than most people realize." He saw their faces fall and felt badly for being so blunt, but they needed to understand the reality of what they were considering. This was not some romantic adventure. This was life and death on the frontier. "However," he continued, "it is not impossible. Plenty of women run ranches out here, especially widows. And you two have an advantage in that there are 2 of you. You could manage together what would be near impossible alone." Hope rekindled in their eyes. "Would you help us?" Natalie asked. "We could pay you once we sell some of the land perhaps, or take out a loan from the bank in Oroville." Franklin held up a hand. "Let us not get ahead of ourselves. First, you both need to recover from your ordeal. Second, we need to wait out this storm. Third, once the weather clears, we will ride out to your land and take a look at what you actually have. Then, and only then, can we make any realistic plans. Does that sound reasonable?" Both women nodded, looking relieved to have someone taking charge of the situation. Franklin suspected they had been adrift since their father's death, trying to navigate a world that had suddenly become very uncertain and frightening. "For now," Franklin said, standing and collecting the empty bowls, "you both should rest. The room through that door is my bedroom. You will sleep there tonight. I will take the floor out here by the fire." "We cannot take your bed," Noelle protested. "You have already done so much." "I insist," Franklin said firmly. "You are still recovering from near hypothermia. You need a warm bed more than I do. Besides, I have slept on this floor many times. It is actually quite comfortable." He would not take no for an answer, and eventually the twins gave in, too exhausted to argue further. Franklin gave them the time and space to settle in, busying himself with cleaning up from the meal and checking that the fire was well stocked. When he finally stretched out on the floor with a pillow and several blankets, he found he was far too alert to sleep despite his own exhaustion. His mind kept returning to the two women sleeping in his bed. Twins, identical in nearly every way, who had traveled halfway across the country to claim an inheritance they knew nothing about. Franklin had been alone on this ranch for 5 years now, content with his solitude, or so he had told himself. But having Natalie and Noelle here, hearing their voices and their laughter, made him realize just how lonely he had actually been. He tried to push such thoughts away. They were guests, nothing more, and they would be gone as soon as the weather permitted. Getting attached to them, to either of them, would be foolish. And yet, as he finally drifted off to sleep, he found himself hoping the storm would last a little longer. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with snow still falling steadily though the wind had died down somewhat. Franklin woke early as he always did and set about making breakfast. The smell of bacon frying and coffee brewing brought the twins out of the bedroom, looking much recovered from the night before. "Good morning," Natalie said, offering him a shy smile. "That smells wonderful." "Morning," Franklin replied. "How did you both sleep?" "Like the dead," Noelle admitted. "That is the most comfortable bed I have ever slept in, though I think a pile of rocks would have felt comfortable after yesterday." They fell into an easy conversation over breakfast, and Franklin found himself enjoying their company more than he had expected. Natalie was the more serious of the two, thoughtful and measured in her responses, while Noelle had a quick wit and a tendency to speak before thinking. Together they created a dynamic that was both entertaining and comforting. After breakfast, Franklin went out to check on Belle and the other animals. The barn was cold but dry, and all his livestock seemed to have weathered the storm well enough. He fed them and made sure their water had not frozen, then fought his way back to the house through the continuing snow. Over the next 2 days, as the storm raged on, Franklin got to know the Bennett twins better. They told him about their childhood in Boston, about their father who had been a merchant with dreams bigger than his means, about their mother who had died when they were 12. They spoke of the shock of learning their father had passed, of discovering he had left them virtually penniless except for this mysterious Wyoming property. In turn, Franklin told them about his own past. He had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers. When the war came, his father and oldest brother had ridden off to fight and never came back. His other 2 brothers had headed west right after, seeking fortune in the gold fields. Franklin had stayed to care for his ailing mother, and by the time she passed 2 years later, he had no interest in Missouri anymore. He had drifted west, working various jobs, until he found himself in Wyoming territory with enough money saved to claim some land and start fresh. "Do you ever regret it?" Noelle asked him on the second evening as they all sat around the fire. Coming out here, being so isolated, Franklin considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted, "especially in the depths of winter when I might not see another soul for weeks. But then spring comes and the land comes alive, and I remember why I chose this life. There is something about building something with your own hands, about being beholden to no man, that makes the loneliness worthwhile. I think I can understand that," Natalie said softly. In Boston, we were always constrained by society's expectations, by what was proper for young ladies of our station. Even when we had very little money left, we were expected to maintain appearances, to marry well if possible. It was suffocating. Is that why you are really here? Franklin asked gently. Not just because of the inheritance, but to escape. The twins exchanged one of their looks. Perhaps a little of both, Noelle admitted. The inheritance gave us the means to escape, but yes, we wanted to escape. We wanted to be somewhere we could make our own choices, live our own lives. Franklin nodded, understanding completely. Wyoming will give you that chance if you are strong enough to take it. This territory does not care about Boston society or proper behavior. Out here, you succeed or fail based on your own merits. On the third day, Franklin woke to silence. The wind had stopped howling and no snow was falling. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake the twins who were still sleeping, and opened the door. The world outside was buried under at least 2 feet of fresh snow, glittering in the weak morning sunlight that filtered through breaking clouds. It was breathtakingly beautiful and extremely treacherous. He spent the morning digging out paths to the barn and the privy, his muscles burning with the effort. By the time the twins emerged, he had managed to create walkways and had fed all the animals. It stopped, Natalie observed, stepping out onto the porch and wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. For now, Franklin agreed. But I would wager we have another storm coming in a day or two. Winter is not done with us yet. Does that mean we should try to make it to Oroville? Noelle asked. Franklin shook his head. The roads will be impassable for at least another few days. Trying to travel now would be suicide. But if the weather holds, we might be able to ride out to your property tomorrow or the day after, just to take a look. That afternoon, Franklin took the time to properly groom Belle and check over his other horse, a gelding named Duke. If they were going to ride out to the Bennett property, he needed both horses in good condition. The twins watched from the barn doorway, asking questions about the horses and about ranch work in general. Franklin found himself enjoying the teaching role. He showed them how to check a horse's hooves for stones, how to tell if a horse was favoring one leg, how to properly saddle and bridle a mount. Both women were quick learners, and their Eastern refinement did not prevent them from being willing to get their hands dirty. As evening fell, Franklin realized with something like dismay that the house seemed too full of life now to ever feel comfortable empty again. Natalie's quiet thoughtfulness balanced Noelle's bright energy perfectly, and both of them had brought warmth to his home that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. He was in trouble, he realized. He was falling for both of them, which was impossible and ridiculous. They were twins, inseparable, and they would be leaving as soon as they could. Getting his heart involved would only lead to pain, but knowing that did not make Natalie's smile any less affecting or Noelle's laugh any less delightful. That night, after the twins had retired to the bedroom, Franklin sat by the fire and forced himself to think practically. The Bennett sisters needed help, that much was clear. They needed someone who knew the land and the life to guide them through their first year at least. He could be that someone, as a friend and neighbor, nothing more. He would help them get established on their property, introduce them to the other ranchers in the area, teach them what they needed to know. And then he would step back and let them live their lives. It was a good plan, sensible and kind. The only problem was that his heart had already decided it did not care about sensible. The next morning brought clear skies and brilliant sunshine that turned the snow-covered landscape into something magical. After breakfast, Franklin announced that if the weather held, they would ride out to the Bennett property that afternoon. "Both of you can ride, I hope?" he asked. "We learned as children. Natalie confirmed, though it has been several years since we have been on a horse. It will come back to you, Franklin assured them. I will put Natalie on Belle since she is gentler, and Noel can ride Duke. I will walk alongside to guide you. They set out just after midday, Franklin having packed supplies in case anything went wrong. The ride was slow going through the deep snow, but the horses managed well enough. True to Franklin's prediction, both women quickly remembered their riding skills, though he could see they would be sore tomorrow from using muscles they had not exercised in years. The Bennett property lay about 10 miles northwest, and it took them nearly 3 hours to reach it given the conditions. As they crested a small rise, Franklin pulled up short, impressed despite himself. The land spread out before them in gentle, rolling hills with a frozen creek cutting through the middle. In the distance, he could see a stand of timber that would provide wood for building and fuel. It was good land, better than he had expected. "This is it?" Noelle asked, her voice filled with wonder. "All of this belongs to us. According to your deed, yes," Franklin confirmed. 200 acres and every bit of it useful. You have water, grazing land, timber, and good protection from the wind in those valleys. Your father chose well, even if he never saw it himself. They rode down into the property, Franklin's practiced eye cataloging everything. There was no house, no barn, no improvements at all, which was both good and bad. Bad because it meant starting from absolute scratch, but good because it meant they could build exactly what they needed without having to work around someone else's poor planning. Near the creek, Franklin found the perfect spot for a house. It was on high enough ground to avoid spring flooding, but close enough to the water for convenience. The stand of timber was within easy hauling distance, and there was a natural meadow that would make excellent pasture. "This is where you should build," he said, dismounting and walking the area. "House here, barn over there, corral between them. You could dig a well right about here, though you have the creek for the livestock. Plant a garden on the south side where it will get full sun. In 2 or 3 years, you could have a proper working ranch." Natalie and Noel dismounted as well, walking around the area with expressions of mingled hope and uncertainty. "It seems so overwhelming," Natalie admitted. "We would not even know where to start." Franklin turned to face them both, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "I could help you," he said. "My place is only 10 miles away, an easy ride in good weather. I could come over several times a week, help you plan things out, maybe do some of the initial building. In return, once you are established, you could help me out during roundup or harvest time." "It would be a fair trade." "That is too generous," Noel protested. "You would be giving far more than you would receive." "Not so," Franklin said. "Having neighbors I can count on is worth a great deal out here. Besides, I would like to help. I want to see you succeed." The twins looked at each other, that silent communication flowing between them again. Then Natalie stepped forward and took Franklin's hand. "We accept, with gratitude. We promise we will work hard and learn quickly. We will not take advantage of your kindness." Franklin felt the warmth of her small hand in his and had to resist the urge to pull her closer. "I know you will not," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You are both fighters. I saw that when I found you in the storm. You did not give up, even when you had every reason to. That is what it takes to survive out here." They spent another hour exploring the property before the failing light forced them to turn back. The return journey was slower, as both women were tiring and the horses were weary. By the time they reached Franklin's ranch, full dark had fallen, and all 3 of them were exhausted. Over dinner, they talked excitedly about plans for the Bennett property. Natalie favored a practical approach, focusing on basic necessities first, while Noel dreamed bigger, talking about eventually having a large house with glass windows and a proper parlor. Franklin listened to both of them, offering advice when asked, but mostly just enjoying their enthusiasm. As the evening wore on and the conversation drifted into comfortable silence, Franklin found his gaze drawn to Natalie. She was staring into the fire, her profile soft in the flickering light, and he thought he had never seen anyone more beautiful. Then Noel laughed at something, and he turned to look at her and found her equally captivating. He was in serious trouble. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. The weather remained cold but mostly clear, with only occasional snow squalls to interrupt their work. Franklin began riding over to the Bennett property every few days, helping the twins plan out their ranch. They spent hours pacing off distances, marking where buildings would go, calculating how much lumber they would need. During this time, Franklin taught them countless practical skills. He showed them how to fell a tree safely, how to trim and prepare logs for building, how to set corner posts so they would not shift over time. Both women proved to be capable students, unafraid of hard work despite their refined upbringings. Natalie had a gift for organization and planning. She kept careful notes of everything Franklin taught them, making sketches of how the buildings should be constructed. She asked thoughtful questions and rarely needed to be told something twice. Noel, meanwhile, had a natural physical grace that translated well to ranch work. She learned to handle an axe with surprising skill, and she had an intuitive understanding of animals that Franklin found remarkable. His horses, which were usually standoffish with strangers, took to her immediately. But it was the little moments that were undoing Franklin. The way Natalie bit her lower lip when concentrating on a problem, the way Noel's eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way both of them looked at him with such trust and appreciation. He was falling deeper every day, and he knew it was foolish, but he could not seem to stop himself. The twins continued to stay at his ranch house, and Franklin continued to sleep by the fire. He told himself it was only until they could get a cabin built on their own property, but the truth was he liked having them there. He liked coming in from morning chores to find breakfast waiting and coffee brewing. He liked the sound of their voices, their laughter, their constant presence. One evening, about 3 weeks after he had found them in the storm, Franklin was repairing a bridle while the twins worked on sewing new curtains for their future cabin. Noel suddenly set down her sewing and looked at him directly. "Franklin, may I ask you a personal question?" He looked up, immediately wary. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Have you ever been in love?" The question caught him completely off guard. He fumbled the bridle, nearly dropping it. "That is personal indeed." "You do not have to answer," Natalie said quickly, shooting her sister a reproving look. "Noel forgets her manners sometimes." "No, it is all right," Franklin said, setting the bridle aside. "The answer is no, I have never been in love. I have known women, of course, but I have never felt about any of them the way poets write about. I always figured I was not built for such feelings." "And now," Noel pressed, "do you still think that?" Franklin met her eyes, then looked at Natalie, and for a moment he considered telling them the truth. But what truth could he tell? That he was falling for both of them equally and hopelessly. That would only make things awkward and strange. "I think," he said carefully, "that a man can go his whole life not knowing he was capable of something, and then circumstances change, and he discovers he was wrong about himself." Natalie's cheeks colored slightly. "That was a very diplomatic answer, Mr. Fitzgerald." "Please, I have told you to call me Franklin." "Franklin, then," she said softly, her eyes holding his for a long moment before she looked back down at her sewing. The room felt charged with something unspoken, and Franklin excused himself to check on the horses, needing the cold air to clear his head. In the barn, He leaned against Belle's stall and tried to sort through his tangled emotions. The truth was that he wanted both of them, which was impossible. They were sisters, twins, a matched set. Even if one of them were to develop feelings for him, he could not pursue it without hurting the other. The situation was impossible from every angle. He stayed in the barn longer than necessary, and when he finally returned to the house, he found the twins had already retired to the bedroom. He lay down by the fire and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be a long time coming. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Franklin was in the barn when he heard horses approaching, and he emerged to find 3 men riding up to his house. He recognized them immediately, local ranchers from closer to Oroville. Tom Peters, Jim Williams, and Henry Foster, all good men he had dealt with before. "Franklin," Tom called out in greeting as they dismounted. "Heard you had some company staying with you." News traveled fast, even in the sparsely populated Wyoming territory. "I do," Franklin confirmed, shaking hands with each man. "2 ladies from Boston. I found them stranded in that big storm a few weeks back." "We heard," Jim said, grinning. "We also heard they are twins and that they own the old Bennett property up on Crazy Woman Creek." Before Franklin could respond, Natalie and Noelle emerged from the house, alerted by the voices. They approached cautiously, and Franklin performed introductions. All 3 men swept off their hats and offered respectful greetings, though Franklin did not miss the interested looks they gave the twins. "We came by to offer our assistance," Henry said, addressing the women directly. "If you ladies are planning to prove up that property, you will need help. Building a cabin is not a 1-person job or even a 3-person job. Proper ranch work requires a community effort." Natalie smiled warmly. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Foster. We would welcome any help you and your neighbors can provide. We are quite new to all of this, as I am sure you can tell from our accents." The men laughed good-naturedly. "We can tell," Tom admitted, "but being from the East is not a black mark. Most of us came from somewhere else originally. What matters is whether you are willing to work hard and be good neighbors. Franklin here seems to think you are both, and his word carries weight." Franklin felt a surge of pride at that, though he kept his expression neutral. Over the next hour, the men discussed plans for a barn raising and cabin building. It was decided that in 2 weeks' time, weather permitting, they would organize a community work party. Several families would come, the men to do the building and the women to prepare food and help with smaller tasks. "It is tradition out here," Jim explained to the twins. "We help each other with big projects. You will do the same for others when they need it. That is how we survive." After the men left, Natalie turned to Franklin with shining eyes. "Did that really just happen? These men we have never met are going to come help us build our home." "That is the way of things out here," Franklin said. "We take care of our own, and like Tom said, you are part of the community now." The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Franklin, with help from the twins, began cutting and preparing logs for the cabin. They felled trees in the stand of timber on the Bennett property, trimmed them, and hauled them to the building site. It was back-breaking work, and all 3 of them collapsed exhausted into bed each night. But there was joy in it too. Working side by side, they developed an easy rhythm. Franklin found himself constantly impressed by the twins' determination. Their hands blistered and their muscles ached, but they never complained. Natalie's organizational skills proved invaluable as she kept track of every log, every measurement, every detail. Noelle's strength and stamina surprised even Franklin, as she often worked as hard as he did. During this time, Franklin's feelings continued to deepen. He found himself noticing little things about each twin, the differences that made them individuals despite their identical appearances. Natalie was quieter but had a wry sense of humor that came out unexpectedly. Noelle was more outgoing but had moments of deep thoughtfulness. Both of them were brave, kind, and determined. One evening, about a week before the barn raising, Franklin was teaching them how to shoe a horse. Natalie was holding Belle's hoof while Franklin demonstrated the proper technique. Her face was screwed up in concentration, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "Like this?" she asked, attempting to mimic what he had shown her. "Exactly like that," Franklin said, and without thinking, he reached out and wiped the dirt from her cheek with his thumb. They both froze, the gesture unexpectedly intimate. Natalie's eyes widened, and Franklin saw his own feelings reflected there. She felt it too, whatever this was between them. "Franklin," she whispered, and he became acutely aware that they were standing very close together. "Natalie, he started, but Noelle's voice cut through the moment. "How does this look?" She called from the other side of the barn, where she had been practicing on Duke. The spell broke. Natalie stepped back quickly, and Franklin busied himself with Belle's hoof, his heart pounding. That night, as he lay by the fire, he wondered if he had imagined that moment, that connection. But he knew he had not. 2 days later, something similar happened with Noelle. They were alone at the building site, Natalie having ridden back to Franklin's ranch to fetch more supplies. Franklin and Noelle were working to set the corner posts for the cabin, a task that required precise measurement and a lot of physical strength. "Here, let me," Franklin said, moving behind Noelle to help her lift a particularly heavy post. His arms went around her, his hands covering hers, and together they hoisted the post into place. For just a moment, she leaned back against him, and Franklin felt the same electric connection he had felt with Natalie. Noelle tilted her head back to look up at him, and her expression was open and vulnerable. "Franklin," she said softly, "I want you to know we both, that is, Natalie and I, we have grown so fond of you." Franklin's breath caught. "I am fond of you both as well. Is it only fondness?" Noelle asked, and there was something searching in her gaze. Before Franklin could answer, they heard Natalie's voice calling out that she was back with the supplies. Noelle stepped away from him, and the moment passed, but Franklin was left more confused than ever. That night, back at his ranch, Franklin made a decision. He could not continue like this, developing feelings for both women without being honest about it. But he also could not simply blurt out his feelings without considering the consequences. These were sisters who loved each other deeply. If he declared himself to one, what would that mean for the other? Would it drive them apart? He decided to wait until after the cabin was built and the twins were settled on their own property. Then he would find a way to address the situation, or perhaps the situation would resolve itself. Maybe once they were not all living in such close quarters, these feelings would fade. Maybe distance would make things clearer. It was not much of a plan, but it was all he had. The day of the barn raising arrived with perfect weather. By mid-morning, nearly 20 people had gathered at the Bennett property, including families Franklin had not expected. The men immediately set to work on the cabin structure, while the women began preparing an enormous midday meal. Children ran everywhere, playing games and getting underfoot. Natalie and Noelle were overwhelmed by the turnout, and Franklin saw Natalie wipe away tears more than once as neighbor after neighbor welcomed them to the community. These were good people, Franklin thought, the best kind of people. They did not care that the Bennett sisters were refined Eastern ladies. All that mattered was that they were willing to work hard and be part of the community. The cabin went up with astonishing speed. What would have taken Franklin and the twins weeks to build alone was accomplished in a single day. By evening, the structure was complete, lacking only a door, windows, and interior work. But it was solid and weathertight, with a good roof and a large fireplace. As the sun began to set and families started packing up to leave, Tom Peters approached Franklin. "Those are fine women," he said, nodding toward where Natalie and Noelle were thanking everyone. "They have spirit. They will do well out here." "I believe they will," Franklin agreed. "That Natalie, she is something special," Tom continued. "Smart as a whip and pretty too. If she was not already spoken for, I might court her myself." Franklin's head snapped around. "Spoken for? What makes you think she is spoken for?" Tom gave him a knowing look. "Come now, Franklin. The way you look at her, the way she looks at you. Everyone can see it. We are all just waiting for you to make it official." "It is not like that," Franklin protested. "I am just helping them get established." "If you say so," Tom said, clearly not believing him. "But if I am wrong, you should know that Jim Williams has been asking after Noelle. He is thinking of calling on her once they are settled in. Just thought you should know." With that, Tom walked away, leaving Franklin standing there with his thoughts in turmoil. The idea of Jim, or anyone else courting either of the twins, made Franklin's chest tight with something that felt alarmingly like jealousy. After everyone had left, Franklin helped the twins move their few belongings from the wagon into the new cabin. They had recovered their trunk from their wrecked wagon weeks ago, and it contained their clothes and a few precious items from Boston. As evening fell, the three of them stood outside the cabin, looking at what had been accomplished. "We really did it," Noelle said wonderingly. "We have a home." "You did it," Franklin corrected. "You did not give up when things got hard. You learned and worked and earned this." Natalie turned to him, her expression serious. "We could not have done any of it without you, Franklin. You saved our lives in that storm, and then you saved our future. We can never repay you." "I do not want repayment," Franklin said. "I told you, having good neighbors is payment enough." But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He wanted far more than to be their neighbor, and pretending otherwise was becoming impossible. Over the next several weeks, Franklin helped the twins with the endless tasks involved in establishing a ranch. They purchased a small herd of cattle using money borrowed against their land, and Franklin taught them how to care for the animals. They bought chickens and a milk cow, and Noelle quickly became adept at the daily chores involved in maintaining them. They finished the interior of the cabin, installing the door and windows that Franklin had built. Natalie sewed curtains and made the space cozy, while Noelle built furniture with surprising skill, having discovered a talent for carpentry. Franklin found excuses to visit nearly every day, telling himself it was to ensure they were managing well, but knowing deep down that he simply could not stay away. And the twins always seemed glad to see him, welcoming him warmly and often pressing him to stay for meals. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing the land back to life. The creek on the Bennett property ran high with runoff, and green grass began to push through the brown earth. It was Franklin's favorite time of year, full of promise and possibility. One beautiful May evening, Franklin was helping Noelle repair a fence line while Natalie worked in her garden. They had all fallen into an easy companionship, and Franklin had almost convinced himself that this was enough, that he could be content with friendship. "Franklin," Noelle said suddenly, setting down her hammer, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "You think it is possible for a man to love two women equally?" Franklin's hand stilled on the fence post. "That is an odd question." "Is it?" Noelle met his eyes. "Because I think you do." "Love us both, I mean, Natalie and me." Franklin opened his mouth to deny it, but found he could not lie to her. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "God help me, yes, I do. I tried not to. I know it is impossible and foolish, but I cannot seem to help myself." To his surprise, Noelle smiled. "It is not foolish, and it might not be as impossible as you think." Before Franklin could ask what she meant, Natalie approached from the garden, her hands full of early spring greens. "Noel, are you tormenting Franklin with impossible questions again?" "Not impossible," Noel said. "In fact, I think it is time we all had an honest conversation." Natalie looked between her sister and Franklin, and understanding dawned on her face. She set down the greens and came to stand beside Noel. "I agree. We have all been dancing around this for weeks, and it is time to address it." Franklin felt his heart begin to pound. Address what exactly? The twins looked at each other, that silent communication flowing between them again. Then Natalie spoke. "Noel and I have talked extensively about this. We know that you have feelings for both of us, Franklin. We have known for weeks, and we want you to know that we both have feelings for you as well." "That is impossible," Franklin said, though hope was rising in his chest. "I cannot court you both. Society would never accept such a thing." "Society," Noel laughed. "Franklin, we left Boston society behind. We are in Wyoming now, on the frontier, where people make their own rules. And here is what Natalie and I have decided. We do not want to be separated. We have been together our entire lives, and we cannot imagine a future where we are not together." "But we also both love you," Natalie continued. "And we believe you love us both, so we have a proposal for you, unconventional though it may be." Franklin felt as though the world had tilted sideways. "A proposal? Marry us both," Noel said simply. "Not legally, we know that is impossible. But in our hearts, before God, let the three of us pledge ourselves to each other. Build a life together, the three of us, right here on this land." Franklin stared at them both, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You cannot be serious. That would be people would talk. They would shun you." "Let them talk," Natalie said firmly. "Franklin, we have found something out here that we never had in Boston. Freedom. The freedom to live as we choose, to love as we choose. Most people will simply see two sisters living together on a ranch with their neighbor helping out. They do not need to know the details of our private lives." "And those who figure it out?" Franklin asked. "Those who would judge us for finding happiness in an unconventional way are not people we care to associate with anyway," Noel said. "The people who matter, who truly matter, will see that we are happy and productive members of the community. That is all that counts." Franklin's mind was reeling. Everything they were saying made a terrible, wonderful kind of sense, but still, he hesitated. "I do not want to bring shame on either of you. You bring us only joy," Natalie said softly, taking his hand. "You saved our lives, Franklin. You helped us build a future when we had nothing. You have been kind and patient and good. We love you, both of us. Is it so terrible to want to spend our lives with you? And we would not be doing this if we had not both agreed," Noel added, taking his other hand. "Natalie and I have discussed this endlessly. We both want this, equally and completely." Franklin looked at their faces, so similar yet so dear to him in their own distinct ways. He saw hope there and love and determination. These were not foolish young women making a rash decision. They had thought this through, understood the risks, and were choosing it anyway. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Both of you, completely certain," they said in unison. And despite the seriousness of the moment, Franklin found himself smiling at the synchronicity that had first amused him months ago. "Then yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you both in whatever way we can manage. I love you, Natalie, and I love you, Noel. I do not understand it, but I know it is true." Both women threw their arms around him, and Franklin found himself in the center of a three-way embrace that felt like coming home. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other, committing to a future that would be unconventional and challenging but also full of love. That evening, they sat together in the cabin and planned their future in earnest. They decided that Franklin would officially sell his small ranch and move to the Bennett property, combining their resources. They would tell people that he was the foreman, helping the sisters run their place. It would not be entirely untrue. "We will need to be discreet," Natalie said practically. "Especially at first, until people get used to the arrangement." "Agreed," Franklin said. "But within these walls, we will be honest about what we are to each other." They talked late into the night, planning everything from living arrangements to how they would manage the ranch to what they would tell future children. Because yes, they all agreed they wanted children someday, and they would cross that bridge when they came to it. As Franklin finally rode back to his own ranch in the early hours of the morning, he felt happier than he ever had in his life. He had found love in the most unexpected way possible, and while he knew there would be challenges ahead, he also knew they would face them together. Over the following months, Franklin's ranch was sold to a young couple just starting out, and he moved his belongings to the Bennett property. To the outside world, he was simply the foreman, living in a small room they had added to the cabin. In reality, that room was used mostly for storage. Franklin shared the main bedroom with Natalie and Noelle. Their unconventional arrangement remained mostly private. They were careful in public, never showing more affection than would be appropriate between friends. But at home, they created a life full of love and laughter and partnership. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Franklin's experience, Natalie's planning skills, and Noel's natural affinity for animals proved to be a perfect combination. By the end of the first year, they had expanded their herd significantly and were earning enough to not only pay back their loans but to make improvements to the property. The community accepted Franklin's presence on the Bennett ranch without much comment. A few people raised eyebrows, but most simply saw it as a practical arrangement. Two single women needed help running a ranch, and Franklin was a good man willing to provide that help. If there was more to it than that, well, most people were too polite or too busy with their own lives to care. Tom Peters, however, pulled Franklin aside one day at the general store in Oroville. "I will ask you this once, and then I will never mention it again," he said quietly. "Are those women safe with you? Are they there of their own free will?" Franklin appreciated the question, understanding that Tom was simply looking out for the twins' welfare. "They are completely safe, and it is entirely their choice. I would never hurt them, Tom. I love them." Tom studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "That is all I needed to hear." "You are a good man, Franklin. Whatever arrangement you all have worked out, I wish you well." It was more acceptance than Franklin had dared hope for, and it made him realize that people on the frontier understood that sometimes survival and happiness required unconventional solutions. 2 years after the night Franklin had found them in the storm, Natalie discovered she was expecting a child. The joy in the household was indescribable, though they knew they would have to navigate some tricky social situations. They decided to tell people that Natalie had married Franklin in a private ceremony, which was not entirely untrue. They had performed their own ceremony, the three of them, under the Wyoming stars, pledging their lives and love to each other. It might not be legal, but it was real in every way that mattered. The baby, a boy they named Frederick, was born in the winter, and Franklin had never known love like he felt holding his son for the first time. Natalie was a natural mother, and Noelle stepped into the role of aunt with equal grace, helping care for the baby as if he were her own. A year later, Noelle also became pregnant. This time they claimed that she had married Franklin as well, after Natalie had tragically died in childbirth, and Franklin and Noelle had fallen in love while comforting each other. Of course, Natalie was very much alive, but they simply told people she preferred to stay at the ranch and avoid town. Noelle gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Nathan and Nora. Franklin was overwhelmed by his growing family, and every day he thanked whatever fate had led him to find those two women in the snow. The children grew up surrounded by love, knowing both women as their mothers and accepting without question the unusual nature of their family. In their world, it was simply normal to have two mothers who looked identical and one father who loved them all fiercely. As the years passed, the ranch continued to thrive. They added more land, built a larger house, and became respected members of the Oroville community. Franklin served on the town council, and both Natalie and Noelle were active in the church and various social organizations. There were occasional whispers and speculation, but for the most part, people accepted them. The frontier was a place where hard work and good character mattered more than conformity to Eastern social norms. And no one could deny that the Fitzgerald Ranch was well run and prosperous, or that the children were healthy and happy. On their 10th anniversary of that night in the barn when they had pledged themselves to each other, Franklin took Natalie and Noelle to the spot where he had first found them. It was summer now, warm and green with wildflowers blooming everywhere. They stood together looking out at the landscape, so different from that night of snow and ice and fear. "You ever regret it?" Franklin asked them. "The choices we made, the life we built?" Natalie and Noelle looked at each other, then at him, and both shook their heads. "Never," Natalie said. "Not for a single moment. This life has given us everything we ever wanted," Noelle added. "Freedom, purpose, love, family. How could we possibly regret it?" Franklin pulled them both close, one on each side, and felt the same sense of rightness he had felt that first night when they had agreed to this crazy, impossible, wonderful arrangement. "I love you both," he said, as he had said countless times before. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "And we love you," they replied in unison, and Franklin smiled at the synchronicity that still, after all these years, delighted him. As they stood there wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, Franklin reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. A snowstorm, two desperate women, one impulsive rescue. Such small things to build a life on, and yet here they were. The ranch house in the distance showed warm light from its windows, and Franklin knew their children were inside, probably getting into some mischief under the supervision of the housekeeper they had hired last year. In the barn, their horses were settled for the night, and the cattle were grazing peacefully in the fields. It was a life of hard work and simple pleasures, of challenges met and overcome, of love in its purest form. Franklin had come to Wyoming seeking land and independence, but he had found so much more. He had found family, purpose, and a love that defied convention but was no less real for its unusual nature. He had learned that the heart was capable of far more than he had ever imagined, and that happiness could be found in the most unexpected places. As they walked back toward the house, hands linked, Franklin knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else together. Three people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The years continued to pass in the easy rhythm of ranch life. Frederick grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle. Nathan inherited his mother's skill with animals, while Nora showed signs of Aunt Natalie's organizational genius, even at her young age. 2 years after the twins were born, Natalie gave birth to another child, a daughter they named Nellie. And 3 years after that, Noelle had another son, Marcus. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, and Franklin often found himself stopping in the middle of a task just to appreciate the life they had created. The children attended the school in Oroville, a small one-room building where they learned reading, writing, and arithmetic alongside the other ranch children. If anyone thought it odd that some of them called both women mother, they kept it to themselves. The Fitzgerald children were known for being bright, polite, and hardworking, and that was what mattered. As the children grew older, Franklin and the twins had to decide what to tell them about the true nature of their parents' relationship. They chose honesty, sitting down with each child when they reached a certain age and explaining carefully that their family was different, but no less loving than others. To their relief, the children accepted it with the easy grace of youth. Frederick, the oldest, simply shrugged and said he had always known something was different, but since everyone was happy, he did not see what the problem was. The others followed his lead, and the family's bond only grew stronger for the honesty. The ranch itself had grown into one of the most successful operations in the region. They had nearly 1,000 head of cattle now, and several hired hands to help manage them. Natalie still handled all the bookkeeping and planning, while Noelle managed the daily operations of feeding livestock, maintaining equipment, and coordinating the various ranch tasks. Franklin oversaw everything, but increasingly, he found himself able to step back and trust his wives to handle situations on their own. On their 20th anniversary, the whole community of Oroville threw a celebration in honor of the Fitzgerald Ranch. It was ostensibly a celebration of the ranch's success, but everyone knew it was really about the remarkable family that ran it. Tables were set up in the town square, and families brought food to share. There was music and dancing and storytelling late into the night. Franklin stood on the edge of the festivities, watching Natalie dance with Frederick while Noelle spun little Nora around in circles. His other children were running wild with their friends, as children should. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for this life, this community, this love. Tom Peters, now graying at the temples, came to stand beside him. "You have done well, Franklin," he said. "Built a fine ranch, raised good children, been a solid member of this community. We are all lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Franklin replied. "This town, these people, they gave me and my family a chance when they could have judged us, rejected us. I will never forget that." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Out here, we judge people by what they do, not by what society says they should be. You all have worked hard, treated people fairly, and raised your children right. That is all anyone can ask." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Besides, most of us figured out your arrangement years ago. We just did not care. You are happy, they are happy, the children are thriving. What else matters?" Franklin looked at his old friend in surprise. "Most people know, Franklin, this is a small community. People know everything. But knowing and caring are two different things. You are a good man married to two good women, and if that is how you all want to live, well, it is none of our business, is it?" Tears pricked Franklin's eyes, and he clasped Tom's hand firmly. "Thank you, my friend, for your acceptance, your friendship, all of it." "No thanks needed," Tom said, then grinned. "Now go dance with those beautiful wives of yours before someone else does." As the celebration continued around them, Franklin made his way to Natalie and Noelle. He cut in smoothly, taking each by the hand and leading them both in an improvised three-person dance that made the onlookers laugh and cheer. They did not care about convention anymore, not here, not with these people who had proven themselves to be true friends. That night, after they had returned home and put all the exhausted children to bed, Franklin sat with Natalie and Noelle on the porch of their ranch house. The Wyoming stars blazed overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their vows so many years ago. You remember the night I found you?" Franklin asked softly. "Huddled against that boulder, half frozen, certain you were going to die." "I remember thinking I saw an angel approaching through the snow," Natalie said. "Then I realized it was just a cowboy on a horse, but I was just as grateful." "I remember thinking we were saved," Noel added. "And then being so surprised when you invited us to stay, helped us claim our land, taught us everything we needed to know. I remember the exact moment I realized I was falling in love with you." "When was that?" Franklin asked, curious. "The day you wiped dirt off Natalie's cheek in the barn," Noel said. "I saw the way you looked at her and the way she looked at you, and instead of being jealous, I just felt this overwhelming sense of rightness. Like we were all meant to find each other, all three of us together." "I felt it too," Natalie admitted. "And when I saw you and Noel setting that fence post the way you held her, I felt the same thing. Not jealousy, but completion, like a puzzle finally coming together." Franklin pulled them both close, one on each side as always. "I never believed in fate or destiny," he said. "I always thought life was just random chance and hard work. But finding you two in that storm, building this life together, I cannot help but think we were meant to be." "Whatever brought us together," Noel said, "I am grateful for it every single day." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to its mate. Inside the house, one of the children coughed in their sleep, and they heard the soft sound of another child comforting them. "Our children will tell their children about us someday," Natalie mused. "About the unusual family that made it work despite everything." "Let them," Franklin said. "Let them know that love does not always look the way society says it should. Let them know that happiness is worth fighting for, even if it means breaking a few rules." As they finally headed inside to bed, Franklin took one last look at the land spread out before them. The ranch they had built from nothing, the life they had created through determination and love, the family they had made against all odds. It had not been an easy path, but it had been the right one. In their bedroom, the three of them settled into the large bed they shared, Franklin in the middle with a wife on each side. It was the way they had slept for 20 years, and Franklin could not imagine sleeping any other way. "I love you both," he whispered into the darkness. "Until my last breath and beyond." "And we love you," came the dual response, and Franklin smiled as he drifted off to sleep. The years continued to flow by like water in the creek, steady and sure. Frederick grew into a man and took over more of the ranch operations, showing the same dedication and skill his parents had demonstrated. Nathan became known throughout the region as the best horse trainer around, with a gift for working with even the most difficult animals. Nora developed into a formidable businesswoman, eventually opening a general store in Oroville that quickly became the most successful in town. Nellie became a teacher, founding a school on the ranch that served the surrounding families. And Marcus, the youngest, discovered a talent for veterinary medicine, studying with the doctor in Oroville and eventually taking over his practice. All 5 children married and had families of their own, and Franklin and his wives found themselves grandparents many times over. The ranch house expanded again and again to accommodate visiting children and grandchildren, until it was the largest private residence in the county. Through it all, the three of them remained at the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They aged together, gray threading through their hair, lines appearing on their faces, but the love between them never wavered. If anything, it grew deeper with each passing year, seasoned by experience and trial and triumph. On their 40th anniversary of that night in the barn, Franklin's joints ached, and his back was not what it used to be. Natalie's eyes needed spectacles now, and Noel's hands were gnarled with arthritis. But when they stood together in that spot where he had first found them, they felt just as young and vital as they had all those years ago. 40 years, Franklin marveled. How is that even possible? Time moves differently when you are happy, Natalie said, leaning into him. It flies by in a heartbeat. We have lived a good life, Noel added. Better than I ever dreamed possible when we were shivering against that boulder, thinking we would die. Thank you, Franklin said, emotion thick in his voice. Thank you both for taking a chance on this crazy arrangement, for loving me, for building this life with me. Thank you for finding us, Natalie replied. For not riding past in the storm, for offering us shelter, for seeing something in us worth staying for. You said we were welcome to stay, Noel reminded him, smiling, and we took you up on that offer. Best decision I ever made, Franklin said firmly. They stood together watching the sunset, the ranch house in the distance full of light and laughter as their children and grandchildren gathered for the anniversary celebration. This was their legacy, Franklin thought. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the family they had created, the love they had proven could exist in unconventional forms, the example they had set for future generations. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, they walked slowly back toward the house, arms linked, supporting each other as they had always done. At the door, they paused and looked back one more time at the vast Wyoming sky, at the land they had tamed together, at the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. No regrets? Franklin asked one final time. None, they answered together, and Franklin felt complete. The party inside was joyous, full of love and laughter. Toasts were made, stories were told, and music played late into the night. Franklin danced with both his wives, then with each of his daughters, then with several granddaughters who insisted on turns. By the time the last guests departed, he was exhausted but deeply content. That night, settling into bed with Natalie on his right and Noel on his left as always, Franklin closed his eyes and thought about the journey that had brought them here. A cowboy who had rescued twin sisters from the cold. Sisters who had said thank you. A cowboy who had said they were welcome to stay. Such simple words, such profound consequences. He had given them shelter from a storm, and they had given him a lifetime of love. They had given him children and grandchildren, purpose and partnership, joy beyond measure. He had taught them about ranching and survival, and they had taught him about the infinite capacity of the human heart to love. In the darkness, he felt their hands find his, one on each side, and he squeezed gently. They were older now, all three of them, but the connection remained as strong as ever. Through everything, every challenge and triumph, every joy and sorrow, they had remained united. Franklin. Natalie's voice came softly in the darkness. Yes, my love. Do you remember what you said to us that first night, after we said thank you for saving us? I said you were welcome to stay, Franklin replied, remembering that moment in front of the fire, two half-frozen women wrapped in blankets, their whole future uncertain. And we stayed, Noel said. We stayed and built a life more beautiful than anything we could have imagined. I am glad you stayed, Franklin said, his voice rough with emotion. I am glad every single day. As sleep began to claim him, Franklin's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. He had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and purpose. He had been blessed beyond measure, and he knew it. The stars shone down on the ranch house, on the sleeping family within, on the land that had witnessed so much joy and growth. The Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of another tomorrow, another day to love and work and live. And in that house, three hearts beat in quiet harmony, bound together by a love that had defied convention and proved that sometimes the most unconventional arrangements make the most perfect sense. They had rescued each other, Franklin and his twin wives, each saving the others in their own way, creating together something neither could have created alone. Their story would be passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love in all its forms, to the courage required to live authentically, to the beauty of building a life on your own terms. And always it would begin the same way. A cowboy in a blizzard, two women in the cold, and three simple words that changed everything. Welcome to stay. Those words had been an invitation, a promise, and a prophecy all at once. And Franklin Fitzgerald, rancher and father and husband to two remarkable women, had never spoken truer words in his life.